And there are a group of people, a big, large population of people who, despite being a person of color, can at times appear as though they are not a person of color and they can reap the benefits of being white without actually being fully white. There's nothing wrong with taking your privilege and running with it. Though recently I have been seeing a interesting thing develop with this concept of appearing as white despite not being fully white. And it's kind of become unrecognizable in online recently, so I really wanted to talk about it. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. And if you're new here, hi, my name is Zaria, and I typically make commentary videos just like this one. So that's right, folks. I'm doing another controversial video topic. So all that I request of you guys is to just actually watch this video to the end. I know you might be like, you're trying to force me to get your attention up. I'm really not. When it comes to videos like this, I find that some people don't actually listen to everything that I have to say, and they just take some points that I say out of context and then they run with it and say that's my opinion. So I request that if you do want to leave a comment on this video and it is pertaining to the topic and not just telling me you think I'm pretty or something, please watch to the end of the video because I don't want a person to misconstrue what I'm saying. What I am talking about today is the concept of white passing. We all know that in life, the darker you are, the more problems you may face. Kind of like that South Park game that came out in like 2012.
Don't worry, this doesn't affect combat, just every other aspect of your whole life.
Same thing. Your life gets more difficult the darker that you are, and that's just a fact. I mean, if you just from a baseline, because people see your race before they see, you know, who you are as a person. Recently on TikTok, I've been seeing this kind of misconception of what white passing is. I don't like that word. I'll get more into that later. But as a black person, I know many people who are way darker than me, people that are way, way lighter than me. And I know many people who are mixed. Many people in my family are mixed. There are also some people in my family who, despite having two darker skinned parents, appear to be lighter than the rest of the bunch. And that just is a lot of factors, especially like if you where you live, how much you go outside, so on and so forth. So these videos I've been seeing on TikTok recently have kind of been portraying very identifiable people of color. Like I'm talking about, they would get stopped in an airport, they would get strip searched, they would probably get, popped by the police if they move their hand too fast. And they're being told that they are white passing.
The Kardashians have done a number on our society if you think that I look white passing. Get your eyes checked.
And some of these people are literally darker than me. And I'm not saying I'm the darkest person ever, but I would say that most people look at me and they're like, oh, that person's black. So, well, not all the time, but most of the time people see me as black and I don't really get any sort of person telling me or thinking that I'm a different race, if that makes sense. So, in today's video, I wanted to talk about white passing. And with the whole Generation Z being one of the most ethnically diverse generations, thus far, I wanted to discuss the differences between white passing versus appearing to be white, which I will get into that, I promise, because I have a big problem with just calling people white passing like that. I'm going to talk about the history of white passing and why people were trying to appear to be white and still try to this day, despite, times being a little bit different than what it was in like the Jim Crow era. So firstly, I wanted to talk about what is white passing. So white passing is kind of generally known as a person who is a person of color being kind of seen as being white. And that's kind of like the definition that the streets use. That's what most people are like, oh, like that person's white passing. That person is white passing, so on and so forth. Just meaning a person who is a person of color who may appear to be white from a first glance. Now, passing is a term that's used in general, specifically in the transgender community, as a person who, let's say, their gender is female and they want to pass as a female. So they will go through a lot of effort and a lot of steps in order to be perceived as being female, and that is seen as passing. Because a person may not want everyone to know they're transgender just by looking at them, so they want to pass. And that's kind of where that thought process comes from, is passing as something. I think about this movie that I watched in my race and gender and media studies class, and it was a movie called The Imitation of Life. I watched the 1959 version, but I believe there's a 1936 version. I watched the that version because this is what my teacher assigned. I don't know. The main character, Sarah Jane, has a black mother and she appears to be light skinned. Like she appears to be basically white. Like any person who looks at her would see her as a white person because she has very white, like Eurocentric features, has very light, fair skin. And to even make it even more interesting, they move in with a white family, and there is another girl who is Sarah Jane's age named Susie, who is a white person. And she goes and Sarah Jane goes through a lot of efforts to make sure everyone in her life doesn't think that she's black, like at all. Even to the point to where her mom came to give her something that she forgot and she tried to pass it off and say that that was her housekeeper and that wasn't actually her mother. She went through such an effort to hide her black identity because, I mean, literally, who wouldn't? And her partner at the time soon discovers that she actually is black and he is extremely racist and literally tries to unalive her. When it comes to passing in general, the idea is that a person wants to be perceived as something, but that's what it is. A person wants to be perceived as a certain thing. A person who has the gender identity of a female probably wants to wear things that are seen as more feminine presenting because they want to be seen as a woman, female, whatever you want to say. So when it comes to being a black person, if you want to be perceived as white, it's actually very easy. I mean, I could start skin bleaching and I'm sure by next year I would look, 5 shades lighter. I could get plastic surgery, I could change my nose. That's my biggest giveaway that I'm black is my nose. So I could get, nose surgery. I could do all of these things to make myself look, you know, racially ambiguous. And I don't, but some people do. And that is kind of what it is. A person is actively going towards the emotions to be appearing as though they are white. And just referring to a person who happens to be a person of color as white passing, even though they're not trying to appear white, they just happen to appear to be white. You're telling a person, like, oh, you're trying to be white, but it's like, no, I was just born with a white parent. That's all that it is. And even as a black person in 2023, things are not as great as you may think despite all of these years passing since civil rights era. Which also, this is a quick reminder, if you are a person of color, I definitely recommend getting a passport. This is like a serious tone. We're shifting for a second. Get a passport. Get a passport as soon as you can afford it. And it's going to take about, 6 to 8 weeks to come in. But get a passport as soon as you can because you never know what is going to happen. We got it. We're good. Okay, let's continue. If you are accusing a person of being white passing, it's the assumption that they want to be white, when in actuality, I mean, even some white people don't want to be white anyways. Many people who are of mixed race, such as like Logic or Halsey, or really any, like, so we're seeing so many TikTokers that I've gone on to TikTok. And granted, I have a pretty good identifier. Like, I can look at someone and I'm like, oh, that's a person of color pretty easily. But I know not everybody has that sense. So I scroll through TikTok and I see people who are very clearly not just white, but the comments will all be like, "You're a white person, you're a white person," and like, yes, they are white, but they are also something else. That's the thing about being mixed; you got more than one race to be. So people like Logic and Halsey actually push for their black identities to be seen because if you're working at 25% of being black, you kind of have to like, be like, "Hey, like, I'm black, like, I'm not just white." So, all this to say, my problem with white passing is that we shouldn't just call a person white passing because 'cause they're probably not actively trying to pass as a white person. They're just living their lives and happen to be a lighter skin color, and that's all that it is. So, that's why I like to use the term "a person who appears to be white" because they may not do it on purpose. It could just literally be their face, and you can change your face, but not in the context that I'm talking about right now. So now I want to talk about the history of white passing and kind of that whole vibe. So, really quick, if you're from Florida like me, you probably likely didn't get a lot of education when it came to slavery times and even post slavery. I remember specifically, I'll give you guys a quick rundown of the Florida education system when I was in school, which was in high school. I graduated high school in 2019, right before the vid hit. So that's great for me. I got a prom, thank God. But I was basically taught slavery happened, and then the slaves were freed, and then Jim Crow happened, and then racism was solved. And that's not really the case at all, is it now? I have a couple of videos that I have that's kind of surrounding this topic of history and the term, not necessarily white passing, but things such as colorism and assimilation into white culture and all of that stuff. I have a couple videos actually. Favorite video is the gentrification of Black culture. That's my favorite video I say that I've made, to be honest. I also have a video on the problem with tanning, and I put in parentheses, you know what I mean. Some people did not know what I meant, which is funny because if they watched the video, they would have known, but whatever. I also recently have a video that I made on hair about the Miel hair situation that happened a little bit ago, about a couple months ago, I think. I also have an insanely old video, and I might actually remake it, called The Sexualization of Black Women and Children. That one is also very, again, it shows why a person would want to be white passing in the first place. So definitely check all those out if you want a more in-depth look at this. This is just going to be a little skim moment. I wanted to talk about something called the paper bag test. Now, this is one of those things that I actually didn't learn in school. I actually learned through this thing. A lot of times, in cultures, Black culture, I know for sure, and I know other cultures like Indian culture and so on and so forth, have oral history, meaning that stories get passed down through generations. It's not specifically written in a history book, but it's a thing that's been talked about through generations. And one of these things is actually the paper bag test. Now, as we know, the classic brown paper bag was used as a gauge on whether or not a person was going to be allowed in a space.
Okay, you're good to go.
So if your skin tone matched the color of the bag or it was lighter, that means you were good to go. This was used in, fraternities, sororities, getting into parties, getting into clubs, social events, churches even, which is the sad part. It was also used about larger issues of class and social stratification and colorism between the African American community. So people were actually barred from having access to public spaces, having access to resources, just because of the darker complexion. So for instance, I do not pass the paper bag test. Paper bag was essentially stuck to a door. So think about a regular door to like a house, and they would stick it to the door, and then you would walk up to it, and if you were the same color or lighter, you were good to go. If not, you got kicked out. Hopefully, the police weren't called on you and you didn't get like jumped by somebody. This is like the most prevalent between the era of slaves being freed to the end of the Jim Crow era. And I'm sure that some people probably still use this test today, some secret fraternities or secret clubs and stuff like that. But I haven't heard anyone do it recently. And I have been a lot of places now as an adult and I haven't seen anything like that. But it could just be people I surround myself with. So, who's to say? Speaking of Jim Crow, right now, Jim Crow laws are trying to be reinstated in Mississippi. Again, get your passport as soon as you can. This is your next reminder. Get a passport if you are a person of color, please. So, the reason why we had white passing individuals in the beginning of slavery times was due to the forcing of sexual relations onto black slaves, specifically women. And basically, if the baby came out light, great, it could be in the house, but if it didn't, it went to the field. And black women were kind of forced to repetitively have children, and then on top of that, those children would consistently get sold to other slave owners and so on and so forth. So people during this era, and even honestly, I want to say now, but I will say from the slaves being freed to about the 90s, so much literature during the time kind of reiterated the fact that if you were light enough to pass, no person judged you. They understood because they would do the exact same thing. If you were given the opportunity to be treated like a normal person, why wouldn't you take that opportunity? Not everybody can be a civil rights leader and advocate. Some people just try to get by and live their lives. So I get it. I really do. But we've reached a time where everyone wants to appear racially ambiguous. Um, and people who are white now want to have children with people of color so they can have light skinned children with good hair and blue eyes and all this other stupid stuff. And that's kind of where we're kind of morphing into now. So, when we're looking at white passing online, there are many videos that I have on colorism and people trying to be white. I've talked about the Kardashians so much, Bad Baby, even when she said she literally said, "Who wants to be black?" Which
Who wants to be black? I don't understand that. I really just can't comprehend it.
I will say that there is a high volume of white women. enough to where it's becoming an epidemic in a sense of them excessively tanning, changing their facial features, doing everything that they can, getting plastic surgery to look like a racially ambiguous woman. Typically, they try to look like a light skinned mixed person, which could mean anything from Hispanic to, you know, black, even Indian, like any sort of race, they try to look like that. And even if it's not intentional, I think that, for instance, if my foundation shade is selling out because it's like summertime and a bunch of white people are tanning, that's kind of a problem because I'm to the point of darkness where it's like that is bordering on blackface, blackfishing. Well, blackfishing for sure, but bordering on blackface, you know? But these people are tanning just enough to where they can get that racially ambiguous look, but still look white enough that they still reap the benefits of being white without having to deal with the issue of being followed around in a store or your heart sinking to the bottom of your stomach when you get pulled over. Um, any of those little things, being microaggressed at work, all those things, they don't ever have to worry about that because they're white women. They don't have to think about it, but they get to also reap the benefits of being a looking like the racially ambiguous so they can, find a person of color boyfriend or girlfriend and they can, live out their lives like that. Now, obviously, don't have the experience of people who are Asian, Middle Eastern, Indian. I think Indian is technically South Asian, probably. I don't have experiences for those people, but what I will say is I have actively seen, for instance, a person who is from Uzbekistan.
Never been called white passing until I got on the internet because the city I grew up in was so non-cultured. We would have like maybe a couple people that weren't white in every class. So to me and everyone else in my class, it was clear that I was like not white. And these are things people said to me growing up that felt racially motivated. Kids constantly asked me if I was Chinese. I don't know what that was about. I'd be at the park and I'd be talking to like a kid and then they'd run to their parents, come back and be like, are you Chinese? I'm Uzbek, so not even like the same region of Asia, but I mean, okay.
So there's been an increase of Asian fishing, people trying to look Hispanic, people trying to look every single race, the amount of cultural appropriation that I see. There is people that are trying to look indigenous, which is really interesting to me. But I could make an entire video on how beauty standards have changed with women nowadays. It's literally like changing like the seasons. Um, but it still is blonde hair and blue eyes. That's the standard. But we have been leaning more towards the racially ambiguous side of things. And when it comes to celebrities like the Kardashians, we can kind of evidently see that they kind of manipulate their bodies and move around based on what they think the trends are. It has turned people to making themselves as dark as possible. And now people as dark as me are being accused of white passing, of being white passing. And they're not allowed to claim that they're a person of color because they're white passing. And it's like, if you look at me and you think that I'm white passing, there is something wrong with the system that we're currently in right now, just to say. Yeah, someone actually asked me, a customer at my store asked me, like, oh, like, is your mom white or is your dad white? And I was like, neither. They're both black. I'm 50% black, 50% black. Mixed with black and black, I am blickety. Actually, no, because I'm like 10% European from like different countries and like 1% like I think Vietnamese and then like 2% Native American, something like that. But I'm black. I'm black is what it is. I'm not going to sit here and claim my 2% German. Why would I do that? All this to say is that whenever you're online as a person, you should think about things that you say, but also just if you can identify like a person of color and you think, oh, that person's white passing, they probably are not trying to pass off as being white because if they were, they wouldn't talk about issues such as colorism or racism or talking about their identity as being a mixed kid. Because if they really were trying to be white passing, they would never mention the fact that they were a person of color at all and they would just talk about being white. So I am going to show a couple of TikToks right now.
I have to respond to this because I laughed so hard
Every time I get on the internet and somebody calls somebody like me or other brown people like me white or white passing or non people of color, because you guys are so used to seeing white people do things like tanning or doing their makeup or getting cosmetic surgery to look like non white people, that you don't even know what a white person versus a non white person looks like anymore. On what planet am I white passing? I'm literally brown. I'm literally brown. I was born in India. I speak my native language. I just have to laugh.
To kind of show you what I'm talking about because it may be like that I'm exaggerating and I want to tell you that I'm not. Literally people that are dark. All of the colors of the person of color spectrum being told that they're white passing when they are so evidently not a person or they're so evidently not white or they are white but like there's something else as well.
Being white passing is a fully new thing in my life. I was born in Iran and moved here after 9/11. No one let me forget I was Middle Eastern, no one let me think I was white. I did not grow up being white. It wasn't until I moved to New York City and started meeting blonde, blue-eyed white girls that told me I'm white and should stop identifying as a brown woman.
And it doesn't erase your identity of being white because if you are, let's say, half white, half Chilean, doesn't mean that you're suddenly not white. It also doesn't mean that you're not Chilean. You're both. That's why you're mixed because you're two races at the same time. You know, when you're taking that little diversity questions whenever you're applying for jobs and it asks if you're two or more races, that would be you. And that's fine. Now I want to get into my final thoughts. So at a first glance, being white passing on social media is something that is harmless. I mean, a person who appears to be white at the end of the day is not harming anyone. They're just doing their thing, living their life, so on and so forth. And I think that it's not a person's fault for wanting to be perceived as being white, to be honest. I think that it is a deep personal issue, but also realistically, why wouldn't you want to be perceived as being white when whiteness is obviously the preferred thing? If you know that if you check off white when you go to the hospital, you're gonna get seen more, you're gonna actually get in a hotel room and not be sitting in a chair at the hospital and not even have a room or even an area with a um, curtain, you might be higher priority with getting jobs. Um, it is really sad. But I can't blame a person for wanting to do that. I can't blame a person for wanting to appear white. That's why whenever I see celebrities that are black that are slowly trying to make themselves look more white, I'm never like, they're anti black. I'm like, that person really needs help and I hope that they find it because that's a problem, obviously. Um, However, the issue with referring to people as white passing and the issue that we have right now is that it perpetuates an erasure of culture. Think about it. Like if a person is, let's say, they're from Bolivia and you tell them like, "Oh yeah, you're white." You're telling them that their culture doesn't exist. That they don't have a side of them that they're just white. The issue isn't people of color. The issue is white people who have made it so that they are tanning themselves so much, changing themselves so much to the point that it's indistinguishable to tell. Like I know obviously there's a white women, you can very clearly see like, oh, that's a white person. And even when you see a white person in dreads or in box braids or doing whatever, you're like, that's weird. But it's in a way erasing these people and seeing people who have for their whole lives been perceived as being Hispanic and now they're being told that they're white because a bunch of Instagram models decided, to get melanin injections or, get lip filler, get BBLs, change the way they look. And now it's blurring the lines between what is white and what is not white. And I think in general, we shouldn't be discriminating based on race anyways, but I do think that culturally it's a little bit messed up. I don't think it's right. I think that we shouldn't be accusing people of trying to be white when they aren't. But also, we should be talking about the people who are white but are trying to be perceived as not white because that is giving I don't even know if it's racism, but it's just wrong. So, I guess that's it. I just want to say that being white passing or appearing to be white is not a choice. A person, can try to go outside and tan as much as they can, but at the end of the day, if they are a lighter person, they're probably going to stay being light. And that doesn't erase the fact that they are a different race. They're allowed to be two or more races. That's why it says two or more races. And also they don't have control over the privilege that they may receive. I mean, again, it's not the oppression Olympics, but there is intersectionality, and a person may, they may appear white, but there could be other things that may be going on with them that, kind of changes their privilege. And I think that they can use that white passing or appearing to be white to an advantage and kind of amplify marginalized communities and, bring awareness to things such as, things happening in Syria right now or Israel or Palestine, any of those things. I think that's really important. So I guess that's literally it. Thank you for listening to my little rant. If you listened for this long, thank you so much. Make sure to like my video if you liked it. Make sure to subscribe to me as well. I really want to get to 10,000 subscribers so bad, and I'm so close, like 800 off, but I'm so close. So if you want to subscribe to me, please do. I would love it so much. I would cry. I think I probably would cry. I'm crying right now. From it's 11 o'clock at night right now. If you can tell, I look tired. But yeah, I'm gonna stop talking because I'm sleepy. But make sure to stay happy, stay healthy, and stay safe. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.